But apparently the call didn't work because just a few minutes later, President Trump threatened Canada with tariffs. The same goes for softwood lumber and Buy America. For 9 years now, our Prime Minister has not gotten any gains for Canada. And now he's admitted that he broke our immigration system. There are 700 foreign students who need to leave Canada within a year. They can illegally cross south into the United States, which would be a huge issue. What is the Prime Minister's plan to fix the immigration system that he broke? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, there are international students who come from everywhere in the world to study in Canada. They're in Canada during their studies. At the end of their studies, they return to their countries of origin. That is what happens in the majority of cases, an overwhelming majority of cases. And we do have a system for when people do not return to their countries. Our immigration system does help us address current challenges. We have reduced immigration to Canada recently in order to give our economy a chance to catch up. That's part of an immigration system that works and that meets the adapting and changing challenges that we have today.
Plan for economy and security that puts Canada first. But despite the fact the Prime Minister has known for years that Trump was threatening these tariffs, and for 3 weeks that President Trump had won the election, the only plan he has is a Zoom call. No plan to reverse his disastrous liberalization of drugs that have killed people and now threaten our borders. No plan to fix the broken borders that he caused. No plan to cancel the tax increases that will drive billions and many jobs away. Where's the plan to put Canada first?
Yeah.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Instead of panicking and falling back on slogans like the Leader of the Opposition, we rolled up our sleeves and we're getting to work. We're working with all the premiers, pulling together in a Team Canada approach, because that's how we defend Canadian jobs from coast to coast to coast. I spoke with Donald Trump yesterday evening, talked about how important it was for us to work together to solve some of the challenges we're facing as a continent, as countries, but also work to grow our economy, protect our workers on both sides of the border. This is the responsible, methodical approach we're taking as we move forward, while our opponent falls back on slogans and fear.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He spoke with the incoming president, and moments later, Mr. Trump put out a tweet slapping a 25% tariff on Canada. So that worked about as well as the Prime Minister's efforts on Buy America and softwood lumber, which continue to be penalized, even though the previous Conservative government got both of those things lifted. Now move over to drugs. The Prime Minister's disastrous legalization and liberalization of drugs has the Americans worried, in addition to costing 47,000 deaths in Canada. Where's the plan to stop the drugs and keep our border open to trade?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Leader of the Opposition is just making stuff up. I clearly spoke with the President of the United States an hour and a half after he put out his suggestion on tariffs. The reality is we're going to continue to work constructively with the incoming administration to protect Canadian jobs, to protect Canadian growth, to take the responsible approach that isn't steeped in partisanship, that pulls together the Team Canada approach that stands up for Canadians instead of throwing our arms up and saying all is broken like the Leader of the Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, that's even worse. The statement went out promising tariffs before they even got a chance to speak. It's kind of like him backing down on Buy America and backing down on softwood lumber, Mr. Speaker. Now let's move to the tariffs the Prime Minister wants to impose on our economy. Quadrupling the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre would cripple our economy. New tax increases on work and energy would do likewise, sending hundreds of billions of dollars south of the border. Now that Canadians are facing this economic crisis, will he at least cancel his plan to hike taxes so we can save jobs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we see once again the Leader of the Opposition flailing and inventing stuff to try and fit his preferred attacks into his priorities. The reality is we're going to continue to work constructively with the incoming administration to do what Canada and the U.S. have always done, create prosperity together, protect jobs on both sides of the border as we grow the economy. When it comes to drugs, Mr. Speaker, we've taken serious steps on that and we'll continue to. If the Leader of the Opposition is suggesting he wants to recriminalize marijuana, let him just say that.
That's right.
Canada First plan to fix what the Prime Minister has broken. The first time he went head-to-head with Trump, the Prime Minister was forced into accepting humiliating concessions on agriculture, steel tariffs, and on Buy American. And that was when Canada had a stronger position thanks to a decade of low-tax, pro-job, conservative policies. After 9 years of economic vandalism, though, he's put Canada in an extremely vulnerable position. Per capita GDP is now lower than 9 years ago. Canada has the most indebted household amongst our trading partners. We have the worst housing inflation, and food prices have risen 37% here, faster here than in the U.S. Now that he's negotiating a position of weakness, why should Canadians expect any...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Export Promotion and International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I want to be clear. We will always be there to protect Canadian workers and Canadian businesses. We have been there for Canadians before when we renegotiated NAFTA. I remind the member opposite that it was the Conservatives who wanted us to capitulate during that time. But we stood strong, and that's a testament to the facts. Canada-U.S. trade is at an all-time high last year of $1.3 trillion. Canada places the highest priority on trade and the integrity of our shared border. Mr. Speaker, we look forward to working with the incoming administration.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
It was that Prime Minister that was forced to accept humiliating concession after concession. And now he's kneecapped Canada's economy. He's slapped a massive carbon tax here while the U.S. doesn't have one at all. Yep. He's raising taxes on investing in Canada while the U.S. is fighting to attract investment there. Exactly. He's imposed a production cap on Canadian energy, meaning Canada will produce less of what the U.S. needs to buy. Yep. There are less than 60 days left to act. It's time for the Prime Minister to put aside his partisanship, his ideology, and his ego. Will he strengthen Canada's position by cancelling his carbon tax and all tax hikes on jobs and investments? Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, will take no lessons from the Conservative. Their strategy, Mr. Speaker, last time was to capitulate on this side of the House. As the Prime Minister said, Mr. Speaker, is to take that seriously and methodically. Mr. Speaker, we have been engaging with our U.S. partner on three key things. The first one is security of the border, security of the North and the Arctic, resilient supply chain when it comes to semiconductors, when it comes to critical minerals, when it comes to energy, and put forward a growth plan for North America, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we'll fight for Canadians, we'll fight for industry, we'll fight for our country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Everywhere we look, we find more evidence of economic carnage, and now we're up against the biggest economic and security superpower, and this government has no plan. We need a Canada First plan to fix what the Prime Minister broke. When he took office, our GDP per capita was 81% of the U.S.'s. Now it's fallen to 73%. It's a made-in-Canada problem, and it's not about vibes. It's driven by higher taxes, higher spending, higher regulation, and this government's economic vandalism. Faced with the threat of tariffs, when are they going to stop the vandalism and start fixing the crisis so Canadians have a chance?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, when the Conservative Party of Canada wanted us to back down during the last round of NAFTA negotiations, we stood up for Canada. We stood up for Canadian workers. Right. We stood up for the steelworkers in Canada, Mr. Speaker. We stood up for Canadian auto workers. We stood up for our farmers and agricultural workers, Mr. Speaker. Right. They want to know what the plan is. We plan on doing it again and getting a win-win for Canada and the United States.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, they backed down themselves last time, and Canada has become poorer since then than Alabama. That's not a record that anybody should be proud of. Our productivity gap with the U.S. costs every Canadian $32,000 a year. Average return on investments are 35% higher in the U.S. than in Canada. Our government's plan to quadruple the carbon tax. They doubled housing prices. They increased taxes on work and investment. With the threat of crippling tariffs, will the Prime Minister end all of the tax increases so Canadians stand a chance?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we have an excellent relationship with the United States, a relationship that is mutually beneficial. We do enormous amounts of trade with the United States, and the United States depends on Canada for much of its energy supply, Mr. Speaker. They want to know what the plan is. The plan is to continue to work with the United States in order to protect Canadian jobs, in order to protect the Canadian economy and make it grow for everyone.
That's right.